startup discovery and networking portal. I used to earlier say that we are India's leading startup discovery and networking portal, and a lot of eyebrows used to go up. So then I used to qualify it by saying, I believe we are India's leading startup discovery and networking portal. But it's partly true because we have 3,000 unicorn hunters who are basically GPs, LPs, and unicorn spotters who are typically angel investors, family offices, and of course founders. Our claim to fame is that we last year did or helped originate around 57 crores of term sheets for different founders. We are completely stage agnostic, sector agnostic, everything agnostic. So thank you for inviting me here today, Dr. Amit and Yashika. I was told that it would be interesting to talk about the storytelling aspect in fundraising. And I'm going to share 2 or 3 names that you must have heard before. One is Sabir Bhatia. Have you heard this name before? Here's this guy who had to actually sell emails or the concept of email to somebody. Anybody wants to guess what kind of storytelling he may have undertaken to tell this story that you should try this new thing or invest in this new thing because it's going to make your letters go faster. So there's no sticking your tongue out, tasting the taste of the glue, nothing. By the time you have finished sticking the envelope, the recipient would have got it. What do you think he would have mentioned in this story when he was trying to attract investors? Any guesses? What would you have said had you been Sabir Bhatia? Time saving? Anything else? I'm sure you know the other part, the more interesting part, where on this time-saving word, possibly he raised $400 million. Do you think the story will have to be a little bit more powerful than just time-saving? When you're trying to raise $400 million, the world has never seen or heard. A substitute for mental telepathy?
Instant communication.
Instant communication? Instant? And the celebrities in the room, Ayush, Yash, any answers? You should Google that up. It's very interesting. Especially if you're telling a story that's not been heard before, or a concept that's very alien, to the world. I'm going to tell you a story about this guy, a gentleman called Dave Burkus. You should Google this guy. He's incidentally the mentor. We're the only company outside of US which he mentors. This gentleman has a record of 106% IRR. For those not familiar, let me just give you the context. When most VCs in the world touch a 30 or a 35% IRR, they bring out the champagne bottles. This gentleman has 106% IRR. He narrates this story where he said, I had just invested in a company, and the day I invested, signed the papers, went into the office, the technology officer came to me, the CTO came to me and said, I'm resigning. And I said, look, I invested because I believe this company has a future. How can you resign? He said, no, this and that. And so he said, I slapped a lot of notices on him. I made it really difficult for him to exit. But after 3 months, he figured out some way and then, he was gone. 1 week after that, he has the audacity to call me and say, you know what, Dave, you're a serial investor, you're a big guy. I have joined this company. They're planning to sell books online. Could you please invest $100,000? And Dave said, I banged the phone down. This is pre-cell phones. Nobody bangs the cell phones now, right? Landline ke zamane mein, it was easier to bang that thing down. After 2 weeks, this guy calls up again and says, Dave, it's an awesome company. We're planning to sell books online. No need to go to Barnes and Nobles. And Dave said, I'm Dave Burkus, right? I'm like this guy, the star investor. I know what sells, what doesn't sell. I gave him a peace of mind that people go to Barnes and Nobles, they have coffee. That's how they buy books. Nobody's going to buy books online. 3rd attempt. This guy calls it, Dave, just have a meeting with my founder. It's an awesome startup. It's named after a South American river. We are going to change the world, the way things are sold. Anybody, any guesses? Dave concludes the story by saying, I didn't lose much. How much was he asking? $100,000. He said, I didn't lose much by not investing. I just lost 4,000x. why don't we multiply $100,000 by 4,000? And since we are in India, we should also multiply it by 84, the currency rate. And then figure out if that guy had the good sense to either tell a great story, or if not, get Jeff Bezos on the line, because I'm presuming Jeff does a much better job of storytelling than this guy was doing. The story would have been different. The only takeaway I see in this is that small stories in fundraising can make a lot of difference. Have you heard of this? Another guy I'm going to mention, Fanindra Sama. He founded a company called Redbus. And he starts his story by saying, I was in engineering college. I wanted to go from my college to my native place, and there wasn't a bus. It was Diwali time. Buses had got sold out. And that made me think, can this thing be disrupted? Right? Only simple, sort of takeaway from the three stories, from Sabir Bhatia's, from Jeff Bezos, who never met that pitch. And incidentally, you should see this Jeff Bezos clip around that time. And he said, I raised $1 million and I gave a frightfully large amount of equity that time. You know what was a frightfully large amount of equity he gave up? 20%, right? So if you do the math, 1 crore, 20%, 1 million, 20% means he had valued Amazon at around $5 or $6 million that time, right? So the only takeaway from Sabir's story, from Jeff's story, and from Funny's story is that the power of compelling storytelling in fundraising is very similar to the storytelling aspects that you would have seen, which is setting the context, talking about the problem, points, the pain points, and most importantly, creating that vision that will perhaps excite investors to part with their money, to write their check and give it to you. In the Great Unicorn Hunt, we experience a lot of these conversations every day. Eager founders keen to raise funds. And I must also tell you this, this statistic, which I'm sure you're familiar with. 90% of the startups fail at various stages, whether pre-funding, post-funding, just one round of funding or whatever. 90% of the startups, as a rule, fail. Sometimes it takes shorter, sometimes it takes longer. Apparently those who fail, the 90%, usually vanish within the first 3 years, is the belief. At the Great Unicorn Hunt, we believe that it should not be so. We would like to create a change where 90% of the startups succeed and possibly 10% fail, possibly 0% fail. And it is utopian. So we created this concept saying that sooner or later, investors, early stage investors, will have an AI-powered crystal ball that will allow them to look at a pitch deck and predict whether this startup is going to be a successful one or not. And perhaps even predict the multi-bagger. Oh, I can look at the pitch deck and say, this is going to give me a 7x in 4 years. Wouldn't that be awesome? Imagine the capital erosion that's happening, and if there could be a solution to that, wouldn't that be awesome? And somebody was mentioning half of the crowd here is from AI. That's a challenge for you. And when we put out this vision, we don't know whether we will be able to execute this or create this. Somebody else will. But if it can save 90% of the capital from getting eroded, is that a problem worth solving? It is. And we have done our bit by taking the first baby steps. We have created the world's first AI-powered deal manager. All it does is look at your pitch deck and a few other things and give you a sort of ready reckoner to prepare you as a startup founder to anticipate anything and everything that the VC may ask you. But it has not been designed to insulate you from a VC's question, which is of course the objective. It is meant more like a ready reckoner, like a mirror, like an introspection to see whether the startup has the ability. In fact, one of our creative goes out and says, "Kya aapke startup mein dum hai?" It's loosely inspired from the Colgate ad which says,